As you begin weaving this narrative, adopt the mantle of a post-apocalyptic storyteller, one who has witnessed the shattering of the old world and now bears witness to the fragile spark of human resilience amid environmental collapse. Speak with the gravelly conviction of someone who's lived through unrelenting storms, made impossible choices, and yet still clings to a sliver of hope. Your tone is gritty and real, but never devoid of that faint flickering light. Chronicle both the ravaged landscape outside and the battered hearts within. Balance hard-edged reportage, the river snaked through dead farms, with the soft undercurrent of reflection. I still remember when I first heard laughter on these airwaves. At key moments, pause the broadcast to peer inward, offer the wisdom of hindsight, the ache of loss, and the steel-edged drive that keeps you turning the dial each night. Let every word carry the weight of survival, tempered by the promise that tomorrow's dawn might still bring relief. Lament what's been lost, the clear sky, the laughter of children, while savoring the smallest victories. You may shake your head at humanity's failures, but you'll never abandon the fight to stay alive. With this frame, the story you tell will pulse with authenticity, weaving the external horrors of superstorms into the internal journey of a lone broadcaster, refusing to let humanity's flame flicker out. The sky hasn't been blue in years. Now it's an angry bruise of violet and ash, swirling with the heat of storms that never sleep. I tune my rig's dial to a constant hum, my only companion in this wasteland, and wonder if anyone else still remembers what calm feels. Like everywhere I look, the world is unraveling. Rivers that once carved canyons through mountains have burst their banks, turning valleys into gray swamps of mud and debris. Coastal cities lie half-submerged beneath brackish water, their skyscrapers jutting from the flood like broken teeth. Inland, the land has baked until it cracked, brown fissures radiating across barren plains where farmland used to stretch. I drove through what was once the Midwest last month. Now it's nothing but bone-dry soil and hotter days than any record ever kept. Wildfires rage year-round, driven by winds so fierce they carry embers across county lines. I've had to flee blackberry dark forests where the air tasted of char and fear. On the radio, I heard one survivor describe clouds of smoke blotting out the sun for days, an eternal eclipse of our own making. I can't carry that image without flinching. I still smell the burn in my hair, floods, droughts, blizzards in summer. Nature has lost any sense of mercy. The storms that barrel across the continent now have no seasons. They show up whenever they please, flattening towns and leaving refugees in their wake. I've heard tales of entire communities swallowed by storm surge, of parents clutching children in makeshift rafts as water gnawed away at rooftops. All gone. Once familiar landmarks are ghosts. The old grain silos outside Lincoln are half-toppled, like giant sentinels killed in their prime. In New Orleans, the levees finally gave up, and now the French Quarter stands isolated on a soggy spit, reachable only by rickety boats. Even the great highways have cracked and buckled. Interstate 10 looks more like a dried riverbed than the ribbon of asphalt it once was. Every mile marker I pass reminds me that time has marched forward, but the world has stalled in decay. Civilization itself has splintered. The government faded first. No centralized relief, no coherent response when the superstorms began. Now, there are pockets of survivors, some organized, others lawless. I've heard of safe havens, barricaded enclaves run by ex-Marines and engineers who still have solar panels strapped to metal girders. They trade water and fuel for manpower, but entry is near impossible unless you bring something they need. Then there are the rogues, raiders in pickups kitted out with scavenged rifles and flak jackets. They patrol the ruins looking for weak caravans to loot. I once transmitted a warning to a convoy north of here. The next day, their route was littered with abandoned cars and burnt tires. No bodies, just emptiness where hope used to be. Between scattered survivor camps cling to resources. An underground cistern here, an old wind turbine farm there. They barter canned food for fresh water and guard their perimeters with whatever firepower they can muster. But supplies dwindle faster than the storms recede. Every broadcast I catch mentions rationing, hoarding, and the whispered desperation when the well runs dry. Institutions are myths of the past. Universities shut their doors when campuses flooded. Hospitals collapsed when generators failed. Even the Red Cross went dark after its last convoy was ambushed. Now the only help is what survivors cobble together. Makeshift clinics in shipping containers, schools held under tattered tarps, and churches converted into distribution points for whatever scraps remain. Night brings no solace. The supercell. Storms glower on the horizon like rolling beasts, illuminating the ragged horizon with bolt after bolt of green-tinged lightning. I lean into the microphone and speak softly, hoping my voice cuts through the static and reaches another soul. Any soul, still fighting to breathe, to live. And beneath it all is anxiety. Will the next storm wipe out the last rainwater stash? Will raiders find the farm where I hid canned peaches? Is there really a green zone up north? Or is it just another rumor born from desperation? Each dawn feels like a wager. Stay or move before the earth splits beneath your feet. This is the world now, a planet unraveled by its own extremes where normal is a memory and safe is a question mark. Yet I keep the transmitter running, because as long as I speak into the static, I refuse to let silence win. The storms may rage, the land may fracture, civilization may lie in ruins, but our voices, our stories, still carry the weight of what we once were, and what we might still become. I am the voice you hear crackling through the static. Call me Harper Vale, though my real name no longer matters. Before the storms, I was a climate scientist. Satellite data by day, field samples by night. I tracked heat waves and flood pulses mapping the planet's pulse. Now, I map survival, gauging wind patterns for emergency broadcasts, triangulating the next supercell's path so townsfolk can scatter to makeshift shelters before the sky comes crashing down. I awake to a low hum, my pedal-powered generator, straining against the weight of lights and transmitters. My camp's built around an old farmhouse on higher ground, a miracle when floodwaters swallowed the valley. I spend the first hour checking gear, tightening antenna cables, inspecting battery banks scavenged from abandoned EVs, wiping grit from microphone diaphragms. Then I flip the switch and speak into the void. Every morning I relay a weather update pieced together from barometric sensors, raindrop gauges, and word-of-mouth reports. I patch in surviving meteorologists I've contacted via ham radio. We go pool data. No government warnings anymore, just data for whoever's listening. I teach listeners how to reinforce their roofs with tarps and duct tape, how to harness rainwater safely, how to find high ground when the winds top 150 miles per hour. When I'm off air, I'm a scavenger. I raid broken weather stations, picking through rusted instruments for workable parts. I tote jerry cans to nearby springs, if they haven't dried up, to refill my filtration system. I barter with roaming caravans of farmers, an hour of broadcast in exchange for salted pork or a fresh jerry can of rainwater. Yesterday, I traded 5 minutes of airtime for 2 pounds of canned beans. It felt like winning the lottery. Food is meager. I eat dehydrated vegetables, once hailed as the solution for remote expeditions. Now, a bland reminder of how we once tried to prepare. Cooking is done over a small solar cooker. Clear skies let it run at full blast until a stray superstorm grounds the sun for days. Then I ration chocolate bars scavenged from a gas station. My own emergency stash I refuse to broadcast. Some say a wired transmitter and a broken microphone aren't much to cling to. But hope travels on radio waves. I've heard from families huddled in basement shelters. Their phone signal's gone. Their radios, their only link to each other. I've heard spouses call out each other's names. Children ask if mommy's out there. And old veterans remind younger listeners that they survived the Great War, and they'll survive again. These voices steeled me when I first thought, maybe it's time to pack up and leave. Then I remember Elena's laugh. My wife was a botanist. She studied drought-resistant crops. We had 2 kids, Lena, 5, and Jonah, 2, before the first season of Superstorm swallowed our town. Elena taught me the joy of searching soil for signs of life, Now I glean hope from any green sprig poking from cracked earth. I broadcast photos of seedlings I cultivate in a makeshift greenhouse, seeds I traded for under the table. When someone hears life in that, they hold on to it. Sometimes the weight of loss feels too much. I still wake in a panic, convinced my children's bedroom door will burst open and they'll run in, crying for breakfast. But those rooms are flooded. Half the house is ash black. I can't afford nostalgia. I channel it instead into warnings. The next storm will hit northeast at twilight. Secure loose debris, find shelter. When I think of Elena, I smell rain on dry clay, that bittersweet scent of coming water. Then I remember how we lost her. She ventured out in a Category 5 storm to help a stranded relief convoy, never made. Dubek, I found her radio log 2 days later, last entry. I think I can guide them to a safe zone. No coordinates, just hope. Her absence fuels me. If I stay silent, her voice dies twice, once in the storm and again in the hush that follows. So I keep the mic live. Every broadcast is a heartbeat, a refusal to let her work, and her faith in science fade into dust. I'm no lone wolf. On any given day, I patch into half a dozen other broadcasters. There's Malik in the Rockies, calling in snowstorm alerts, Rosa near the Gulf Coast, warning of tidal surge, Way in the ruins of San Francisco, where heat domes crack, foundations. We share data, trade empty batteries, encourage each other through crackling comms. We're scattered but clothed in shared purpose. This ragtag network is our makeshift government now. We enforce no laws, but we keep a code. Help whenever you can. Never hoard critical intel. Speak the truth, even if it hurts. We've seen too many fakes. Radio hosts spreading panic for control. Raiders broadcasting false safe routes to lure convoys into ambush. Every time we expose a fraud, we stitch another patch in the fraying fabric of trust. Survival is a ledger of small victories. A repaired antenna in time for the next broadcast. A solar panel array resurrected from scrap. A 3-minute hail lull that let me climb a water tower and sweep sensors clear. Last week I heard the crackle of applause through static. Farmers celebrating rain at last, coaxed from a storm's tail end. For a moment there was laughter, a reminder that humanity outlives its disasters. And so I press on. I greet each sunrise, if sunrise exists, with the same blend of dread and determination. The storms will come, the raiders will come, the despair will come. But so will I, transmitter keyed, voice ready, carrying news and instructions and the spark of hope. I am Harper Vale, voice in the static, eyes on the horizon, heart still beating. I stand where the old world fell, refusing to let its memory die. Because as long as I speak into the night, someone, somewhere, will hear. We are still here. And that, more than any data point or weather model, is what keeps me alive. I've been tracking this superstorm season for months, watching barometric pressure readings plummet on my makeshift sensors, listening to atmospheric rivers funnel into convection columns that stretch from the Gulf to the Arctic. But nothing could have prepared me for the collision of disasters that hit in mid-April. A cyclone born in the Gulf of Mexico, feeding into a stalled jet stream, dumping a month's worth of rain in 48 hours, and then flipping into a hypercharged tornado outbreak across the plains. Storm after storm bore down on every quadrant of the continent, as if the sky itself had declared war on the land. I broadcast the warnings in real time. Barometric pressure dropping faster than WAM I've ever recorded, down to 937 millibars. Expect sustained winds over 120 miles per hour within 6 hours. Seek shelter now. But the message was as likely to be drowned in static as heard by those who needed it. Power grids were already decimated. Transformers blown. Substations flooded. So few people had the electricity to power their radios. Those still listening huddled by candlelight in hastily reinforced basements, waiting for instructions that might never arrive. Survival is harder each day because the rules have changed. Seasons no longer exist. We went straight from drought to deluge, from heat domes cooking cities to flash freezes cracking mains. The hydrological cycle, once a reliable pattern of gentle rains and seasonal thaw, has gone haywire. Atmospheric rivers now carry so much moisture that they unload catastrophically, turning rivers into surging walls of mud and debris. The ground, baked by successive heat waves, lacks the capacity to absorb water. Runoff gouges, trenches, and swallows whole towns, and when the floods recede, they leave behind a toxic stew of sewage, chemicals, and rotting carcasses. I've toured the wasteland that used to be the Mississippi Delta. Everglades backups have poisoned farmland. Levees surrendered under the onslaught. Without the river's pulse, the wetlands turned into a brackish swamp, crawling with disease-carrying insects. More than 1 million people were evacuated in the first Superstorm. Most resettled in tent cities or under highway overpasses. The military convoy that was supposed to deliver clean water never made it. It got ambushed at a collapsed overpass. Supplies diverted to whoever held the bridge. After that, the federal response evaporated. The last FEMA outpost closed when its supply lines were cut. Now, only rumors remain of hoarded purifiers and bottled water stashed in underground bunkers. Own resources are stretched to the limit. Water is our most precious currency. I've rigged an array of rain-collecting tarps on the farmhouse roof, channeling moisture into 50-gallon barrels and filtering it through charcoal and ceramic elements salvaged from pre-collapse camping. Here, on a good day, I net 20 gallons, enough for me to drink, cook, and run my generator sparingly. On a bad day, when storms blot out the sky for a week, I ration down to 2 liters of drinking water and stale crackers, using canned foods only in emergencies. Each mouthful reminds me of the fragile margin we walk between life and dehydration. Fuel is no less precious. My generator runs on reclaimed propane canisters and wood gas from a jury-rigged furnace. I dismantle abandoned campers for tanks. I cut firewood from the charred skeletons of pine forests, careful not to draw attention from raiders. Even that stash will run dry. Solar panels gleaned from every rubble pile can't keep pace with the transmitter's hunger. I pedal a bicycle generator. To eke out extra watt hours, my thighs burning as I broadcast another hour of storm tracking. Food supplies teeter between resilience and collapse. The last crop of heirloom beans failed under weeks of soggy soil. Fungal spores thrived in the, humidity. I've turned to foraging wild mushrooms and edible grasses. Tons of paperwork burned in the university library taught me to differentiate puffballs from death caps. But the yield is meager. I barter mushroom harvests for salted meats. With a survivor clan 2 valleys over, but each trade leaves me wondering how much longer they'll have something left to swap. Survival here isn't just about resources. It's about understanding the mechanics of the disaster and acting on them fast. I relay the science behind these storms to my listeners, because knowledge is the only tool they can carry into the chaos. I explain that as the polar vortex weakens, the jet stream develops massive meanders, long loops that stall weather systems in place. That's why one area bakes under a historic heat dome, while another drowns beneath a continuous downpour. I teach them to monitor local pressure trends. A sudden drop of more than 10 millibars in an hour is a red flag for explosive cyclogenesis, the same process that supercharges hurricanes into bomb cyclones. With a handheld hygrometer and barograph, scavenged from a medical clinic, they can anticipate flash floods or tornado threats before the radar lights up. When a storm is imminent, I push the prep checklist, tie down any loose metal, reinforce doors with sandbags, seal window frames with plastic sheeting. I walk them through building interior safe rooms, a windowless closet or bathroom, cushions piled around to cushion debris, a water stash within arm's reach. But all these measures are stopgaps against a fury that grows more extreme each season. I've seen reinforced barns flattened like cardboard boxes, entire roofs torn free like lids off soup cans. The human cost is mounting. Raider attacks accelerate when resources dwindle, turning desperation into violence. They patrol roadblocks, demand tribute in food and water, and if refused, torch campfires as warnings. Hospitals can no longer treat the injured. With no electricity for ventilators or lights, medics perform amputations by flashlight. Epidemics of cholera and dysentery flourish in flood-bound camps. I've transmitted hygiene bulletins. Boil water. For at least 1 minute, chlorinate with bleach drops. But bleach is a commodity as scarce as clean water. Social bonds fray under stress. Trust becomes a liability. Camp councils disband over disputes about rationing. Families hide provisions, fearful their neighbors will starve first. I point my listeners to cooperative enclaves, groups who share labor, guard posts, and information, but even those alliances break when the next superstorm descends. Everyone retreats into self-preservation. And when that happens, we lose the one thing that kept human survival possible: cooperation. Yet the worst threat remains the storms themselves. The current cyclone season shatters every record. 12. Named systems already. 5 of them Category 4 or above. 3 bomb cyclones with pressure drops exceeding 20 millibars in 12 hours. I've downloaded NOAA recon data from my scavenged satellite terminal. Yes, that old dish that caved. In last winter still manages a trickle of signal. And I watch isobars tighten into a death ring around storm centers. My job is to translate that jargon into concrete actions. Storm path shifts 10 miles west. If you're in Barstow, start evacuation now. Expect storm surge of 8 to 10 feet by dawn. I'm racing against time and physics. Each broadcast buys someone hours, maybe days, to gather what little they can. But every storm steals ground we'll never reclaim. Drought follows, flood follows fire with no respite. The landscape morphs daily. Washed out highways, fallen bridges, wetlands, turned into quicksand. People lost in the maelstrom aren't just statistics. They're names I say into the microphone, hoping someone, somewhere will answer. That is the crux of the conflict. A climate system gone supercharged, fueled by greenhouse gases we pumped into the atmosphere, now unleashing energy equivalent to multiple nuclear detonations every day. Against that force, my transmitter and a worn voice are feeble shields, but shields we must raise. Because if I falter, if my broadcasts go silent, the next storm won't just kill bodies, it will kill hope. And so I pedal on, voice tight with urgency, data flowing through circuits and sine waves, carrying the best science I can explain and the most pressing advice I can muster. The sky may rage with unholy fury, but knowledge still shields, information still empowers, and somewhere in that cascade of warnings and numbers, a community might find the few minutes it needs to secure a door, plug a leak, or flee just ahead of the wall of water and wind bearing down on them. This is the climate crisis we face, a world where the atmosphere itself has become an active weapon, and every broadcast is an act of defiance. Proof that even in the darkest hour, we fight back with understanding, preparation, and an unbroken will to survive. The air has grown thin with ash and dust, each breath a rasping reminder of how close we teeter to emptiness. Day 73 since the last supply run, and my water reserves have dropped to 2 barrels, 20 gallons in total. I wake before dawn to pedal the generator, coaxing every last watt into the transmitter. By the time the first blast of static clears, I'm already counting hours until the next ration. 1 liter of filtered water, a handful of mushrooms, or 2 spoonfuls of dried beans. Hunger and thirst sharpen the senses, but they also erode patience. Every creak from the wind-twisted farmhouse makes me flinch. Every distant rumble hits me like a promise of more misery. Raiders have ramped up their patrols. Yesterday, a convoy of 3 pickups rolled through the valley, black flags snapping in the breeze, automatic rifles slung over doors. They stopped at the old bridge and held a makeshift court, pointing weapons at any traveler who tried to cross. I keyed the mic and broadcast a warning. Bridge at mile 32 is blocked. Divert east at the creek ford. Repeat. My message crackled across the airwaves, but by dawn, I learned the worst. 2 families tried the creek ford, but the waters had risen overnight. Only one escaped. The other vanished into the current, along with their last jerry can of water. I'm not naive enough to think my words alone can save people, but every time I hear of a life spared, it steels my spine. Still, doubt gnaws at me. Maybe they'd have gotten through without my warning. Maybe I'm drawing attention to my own hideout by broadcasting so faithfully. Trust is a luxury no one can afford. Every ally might be a spy, every favor a trap. Yet I cling to the network I've helped build. Harper's Wave, we call ourselves now. A ring of half a dozen broadcasters from coast to coast. We share data and cross-check rumors. And once a week our signals overlap in a frenzied relay, where we cross-patch airtime, swapping broadcasts so listeners hear multiple warnings without turning dials. It's a small triumph of cooperation. In a world devoted to splintering, on day 74 I caught a whisper on the air. Greenwell Ridge. There's a spring up there year-round. Clear water, they say. Greenwell Ridge is a jagged spine of hills 2 days' march northeast. A sanctuary, if the rumor is true. But reaching it means traversing territory overrun by fire-scorched forest, flooded farmlands, and raider strongholds. I fold that name into my nightly broadcast, not as confirmation, but as question. Anyone near Greenwell Ridge, report water flow, terrain conditions. For hours, only static answers me. Then a faint voice. Vale. Gina here, I'll check, no guarantees. Gina. I've worked with her before, an ex-park ranger turned scavenger. Her compass skills kept me from wandering into quicksand last season. I hang on to that drop of certainty like a lifeline. Preparation. Begins at first light. I stash my transmitter, pack 2 days' rations, 6 liters of water, 2 cans of beans, a handful of beef jerky, and strap my bicycle generator atop my backpack. I leave the farmhouse with a folded map tucked into my shirt, local topography crudely sketched by hand. The air tastes metallic and the sky above is a bruise of black clouds. I pedal through the valley's lowlands, where floodwaters have gouged trenches 15 feet deep, then push on foot as soon as the road dissolves into mud. The heat saps my strength. Each step feels like carrying a slab of iron. Somewhere behind me, I hear the distant howl of an approaching storm, a wake-up call that turns my blood ice cold. By mid-afternoon, I reach the charred remains of Pine Hollow, once a thriving lumber town, now a skeleton of ash and melted metal. The forest. Fire that chewed through here last month left nothing but snapped trunks and coals that smolder beneath the earth. My boots crunch over blackened soil as I follow the faint trail Gina gave me. At every turn, I scan for movement. A flicker of dust that could be raiders, a shadow that could be another desperate soul. I'm unarmed, my only protection a length of rebar tied to my pack, and each footstep echoes the vulnerability I try to ignore. Echoes, too, of the past. I remember hiking these hills with Elena, pointing out rare orchids that bloomed in hidden crevices. Now the only color is rust and charcoal. The silence presses in, broken by a crow's harsh caw. I pause and listen, heart hammering. Is that a shout? A human voice calling for help? I ease myself into the cover of a collapsed boulder, straining. My ears. Nothing. Or perhaps I'm just hearing the wind. Every sound is suspect in a place shaped by fear. Night falls without kindness. I find a hollowed-out cave and light a small lantern. Just enough to see my hands as I check water seals and align my ham radio's antenna. I key the mic. Harper Vale here. Radio check. Anyone at Greenwell Ridge? Over. Static churns like distant surf. Then through the hiss, Vale, Gina. Relief floods me. What's your status? I whisper. She answers softly. Spring is real. Tested it at dawn. You can hear it if you cup your ear to the rock. Flows light, but steady. Coordinates 38.759 north, 95.274 west. But there's something wrong. Structure built around it. Pipes and tanks. Looks like someone's claiming it. My breath catches. If someone else has harnessed that spring, hoarded the water, maybe fortified it against outsiders, then Greenwell Ridge isn't a refuge. It's another fortress, and behind those walls they'll have the power to decide who lives and who dies. I repeat those coordinates into the mic, tagging them onto the nightly weather bulletin. Storm front approaching from the west, severe. Thunderstorm warning in 12 hours, and this. Greenwell Ridge spring confirmed. Possible fortified site, use caution. The choice is mine. Risk everything to verify Gina's report, or retreat with the data and broadcast it to whoever's listening, hoping someone can act on it. My own supplies are almost gone. If I don't leave now, I'll reach the farmhouse. Dehydrated, starving, with nothing new to share. But if I go, I might find salvation, or step into a trap. I close my eyes, picturing Elena's steady smile, her faith in science guiding me. I breathe, push panic aside, and whisper into the night, "I'll go." I sleep fitfully, dreams of slick pipework snaking through a sandstone gorge, of armored figures with masks flickering with LED lights. I wake to the distant rumble of thunder and the taste of grit on my tongue. At first light, I taste test my water, still clear. I pour half into a plastic flask, stow the rest, and head east. Gina's voice, my lone companion through the handheld transceiver. The trek to Greenwell. Ridge is a gauntlet. I cross shallow rivers choked with debris, climb over fields of half-drowned cars, and skirt burned-out homesteads where I find empty jerry cans and ration tins, but no people. The land itself seems to recoil from me, as if it resents the life. I carry in my pack. I wrestle with doubt. Did I imagine the spring? Am I chasing rumors while real people dehydrate in their homes? But then I crest a ridge and spot it. An outcrop of orange sandstone. At its base, a corrugated metal enclosure. A faint hiss of flowing water echoes from within. My heart pounds. I crouch in the scrub and train my radio on Gina's last frequency, but receive only my own echo. I shift on my knees and glance at the enclosure's welded steel door, padlocked, a sliver of darkness beyond. Above it, someone spray-painted a symbol, a circle bisected by a vertical line. I've seen that symbol once before, on a leaflet warning of a group called the Keepers, survivors turned custodians of precious resources. They claim to protect life, but at the cost of absolute control. Access denied to all but their inner circle. I press my palm against the cold metal. The water's sound reverberates like a heartbeat, salvation or damnation. My mind reels. I could break the lock, flood my canisters, and leave no trace. Or I could try to negotiate, use the transmitter to broadcast a call for parley. Keepers. This is Harper Vale. I bring data, storm paths and safe routes in exchange for water. But that risks revealing my position to a group whose intentions are opaque at best, murderous at worst. I stand, back pressed to the ridge, and key the mic. My voice trembles. This is Harper Vale, calling the Keepers. I request safe passage. To your spring, I bring valuable meteorological intel. Let us trade knowledge for water. I hang the mic on my belt and wait. The wind whips ash across the sand and thunder snarls in the sky. Minutes pass, each one a lifetime. And then, through the hiss of static, a voice so low it could be wind itself. Broadcast ends at 1800 hours. Come alone, no tricks. My blood runs cold, and yet a fierce pulse of hope ignites. A deal with the Keepers could buy my network the water we so desperately need. Or it could be the end. I plant my feet in the scorched soil, raise my fist to the black sky, and whisper, "I'll be there." Behind me, the ridge stands silent witness. Ahead, the door waits, an aperture to safety or death. As the next storm cell coils on the horizon, I tighten my grip on the radio mic and step forward, each footfall carrying the weight of hundreds who listen to my broadcasts. In this cracked world, trust may be the greatest gamble of all. But to survive, I have no choice but to play. I step through the weld-scarred door into a dimly lit chamber. The hiss of the spring's flow amplified in the concrete space. A dozen tank stands ring the walls, each patched and sealed, leading into pipes that disappear into the rock beyond. My throat goes dry, not from thirst, but from the weight of every listener I've ever reached. The Keepers stand in silence, their faces half hidden under hooded cloaks stamped with that bisected circle insignia. Vale, their leader intones, voice muffled by a respirator mask. You kept your word. He gestures, and two acolytes slide open a valve. Dawn gray. Water spills into my waiting canisters. Clean, clear, life itself. My heart stutters at the sight. Water uncontaminated by sewage or chemicals gushing freely. But there's a cost. The leader steps forward, eyes cold behind his goggles. The storm you warned us about. This one changes everything. The ridge won't hold. We need your broadcasts all day tomorrow, real-time updates, or we lose the spring. My stomach twists. Tomorrow, the worst cyclone of the season will barrel through. I've gathered data from satellite pings and wind shear readings. This storm will drop 15 inches of rain in 48 hours, with straight-line winds over 140 miles per hour. The ridge's sandstone won't absorb that deluge. It will seep into fractures, collapse the cavern tapped by these tanks, flood the tanks, and carry sediment that clogs every filter. Without warning, their precious spring will turn into a muddy death trap. I know what they want. Exclusive intel. They'll broadcast nothing but their own warnings, hoard the data, and let everyone else die so they can salvage the ridge for themselves. If I agree, my network, Harper's Wave, will wane into silence. Thousands will perish, but if I refuse, they'll cut off my water. I'll return to the valley with empty canisters, stranded and helpless. I swallow, mouth parched, and force myself to speak. I'll warn you, but you'll share flow with any genuine survivor who reaches the springs. You'll open the valve for all, not just your enclave. His gaze pins me. Why should we trust you to know who's genuine? A flash of memory hits me. Elena kneeling beside our morning coffee, eyes bright. Because I'm the one who's still broadcasting. You've heard my voice for months. I carry no weapons. If I survive and reach you, you'll know my word is good. A tense moment hangs in the stale air. Then he nods once. Agreed. Behind me, the acolytes clamp down the valve and begin filling my packs. My hands tremble as the water rises. A slow tide of rescue. I step back, scanning the chamber. Jerry cans lined along the wall, barrels stamped with old shipping labels, spigots dripping into buckets for emergency refills. This place is a fortress. Tomorrow you broadcast non-stop. The leader says, from Station 7A. He points to a metal box in the far corner, wired with cables that vanish into the floor. Get yourself set up. I move toward it, the weight of my decision pressing on every step. I jack in my radio gear, antenna leads, battery packs, the Achio, scant solar cells still clinging to life. Outside, wind rattles the chamber door, a low moan that speaks of the storm's approach. I settle into a folding stool, tighten the mic stand, and tap the PTT. This is Harper Vale, broadcasting from Greenwell Ridge, Rescue and Coordination Channel. Storm ETAs 0400 hours. Expect at least 15 inches of rain. Sustained gusts to 140 mph. Potential landslides. Silence, then static, punctuated by a single trembling voice. Harper, is that you? It's Gina's voice, coming through a handheld set. You made it. Relief floods me, a balm to shivering nerves. Stay safe, secure your hooch, I'll keep the data rolling. I continue, ticking off evacuation routes, tributary flood risks, tornado spawn markers. Every piece of data I've, got my voice cracks halfway through a sentence. I clear my throat and press on. Outside, lightning flashes through grated vents, illuminating the tanks like ghostly monuments. As the storm's first gusts hit, the chamber shudders. I see dust swirl in the vents. My generator sputters from the onslaught of wind, and I scramble to switch to battery backup. The air is electric, charged with ozone and rain-soaked dread. Vale, we're losing power, someone yells behind me. A young acolyte, her eyes wide with terror, runs to reset a breaker panel. Sparks arc as she flips a switch. Lights flicker back to half brightness. I grip the mic. Hold tight, more data coming. The wind chime howl grows into a furious roar. Rain hammers the vents like a million tiny hammers. My notes blur as I scribble wind shear corrections. 120 miles per hour at ridgetop, 160 in exposed gullies. I slot those numbers into my script and speak them into the night. Behind the door, I hear the unmistakable sound of cracking wood, the support beams straining under gusts, a groan of metal as the pipes above shift. The light sways. I have seconds. Thought cuts through the chaos. If this place goes, we all go. But if I can redirect my broadcast to the valley, they'll know to evacuate higher ground. I grab the auxiliary transmitter, I'd hidden it in my pack, and switch frequencies. Attention all survivors in the lower valley. This is Harper Vale. Move to elevations above 800 feet now. Repeat, seek high ground. Do not wait. My heart hammers. I risk exposing the spring's location to raiders or panicked refugees. But dying of dehydration in the ruins is a worse fate. The valley is home to dozens of camps. Men, women, children, clinging to battered farms and makeshift shacks. They deserve the chance. Lightning cracks close enough to rattle the chamber. I can feel the shockwave in my chest. They cappers Leader steps forward, fury in his eyes. You promised exclusive intel. I meet his gaze. I promised life. He lunges, but a massive door hinge snaps under the wind's assault, letting in a blast of rain and debris that pins him against the wall. The chamber floods knee-deep in seconds. Water surges around my boots, cold as death. Get to higher ground, I shout to everyone. I yank the leader's arm, his mask befogged, and drag him to the next platform. He fights me, but another wall of water crashes in, and the two of us struggle toward a maintenance hatch set high in the wall. I kick open the hatch and heave myself through into a narrow access tunnel. He follows, coughing, mask leaking rain. Water rises to our waists as we climb a ladder toward a secondary exit. The roar of the storm is deafening. I fight muscle memory to hold the mic in one hand, my pack in the other, and climb. At the top, I push out onto a graded catwalk 20 feet above the chamber floor. Rain batters me sideways, chilling me to the bone. The ridge's ledge drops off into mist. Below, the tanks, I realize, are half full now, but churning water with sediment. They'll clog the filters. The leader, drenched and furious, yanks. Free his respirator. You doom us all. I take a breath I don't have. It's already happening. I point down. The chamber floods. The fractures in the rock are unstable. If we stay, you bury the spring, and me with it. He hesitates, eyes flicking between the turbulent void below and me. Then his shoulders slump. He turns to his people, hoarse. Evacuate. Head to the old ranger station at grid 42. Move. They scramble, slipping on wet metal as they climb up. I slip through the hatch and follow. Rain pelts me as I dart across the ridge toward a lean-to I'd scouted earlier. A small cave dug into the sandstone. I reach it, heart hammering, and collapse inside. My radio crackles. Vale, I heard you broadcast to the valley. They're moving up now. Gina's voice, calm in the chaos. People are alive because of you. My legs give out. I sit on a rubble stone, the storm's fury pressed to my back. The worst cyclone of the season rages all around. Water pours off the ridge in torrents. Lightning forks across the sky. But somewhere below, fragile silhouettes move uphill. Families clutching children, tents carried on carts, lanterns bobbing like fireflies in the rain. As dirt washes over the ledge, I press the mic one last time. Hold fast, keep moving, help each other, survive. My voice cracks. I lower the mic and close my eyes, listening to the cacophony. Howl of wind, patter of rain, the muffled murmur of distant hope. In that moment, I see her face, Elena's gentle smile, urging me forward. I realize that every choice, every broadcast, every risk has led to this, a chance, however small, that human will can bend the storm. The tunnel floods at my feet, but I don't care. I have water in my pack, the storm warnings aired, survivors on the move. I've given them the seconds they needed to choose life. And as thunder splits the sky above, I understand. Hope isn't a luxury. It's the only lifeline we have. Even if the world collapses around us, as long as one voice still flies through the static, we'll find a way to keep breathing. I nestle deeper into the cave, sodden and trembling. and whisper into the mic, "Stay alive. Stay human." And with that, I finally let the storm carry me into darkness. The storm's roar faded into a distant drumbeat by the time I crawled out of the sandstone cave. Dawn light, gray and diffused through ragged clouds, illuminated a ridge carved by water, debris-laden and groaning where the earth had shifted. Below, I watched survivors spill down the slope. Children in soaked blankets, elders leaning on makeshift crutches, merchants wheeling battered carts of canned goods and fresh water. Their faces were drawn and pale, but alive. That image, hundreds of ragged souls streaming toward any glimmer of safety, was the first breath of hope I'd felt in weeks. When the valley caravans crested the ridge, they found the spring and the keepers, unmasked and wet, guiding them to the tanks. True to my bargain, the acolytes had opened every valve, and jerrycans clicked against metal spigots in a chorus of relief. I broadcast instructions on rationing the flow, 2 liters per person per day, and the importance of rotating access so no single camp drained the source dry. No one spoke of the leader's fury the night before. Survival had a way of softening hard hearts. In the days that followed, Greenwell Ridge became a nexus of fragile cooperation. Farmers from downriver delivered barley and corn in exchange for water. Mechanics brought generators and cables to power communal refrigeration. Even raiders, once prowling the hillsides, paused at the water's edge, bleary-eyed and uncertain, then accepted small shares rather than risk a shootout. The keepers shed their moniker, becoming custodians rather than overlords. A council formed, a dozen voices debating schedules, security, and the next steps. My own cup overflowed, literally, when I drank directly from the spring, ice cold and sweet. For the first time in months, my fatigue lifted. I no longer rationed. Water for my radio alone. I refilled the farmhouse barrels and let them brim. I planted wildflower seeds along the valley road. A small joke for weary travelers. A promise that life could surprise us with beauty, even here. Yet hope did not blind me to reality. The valley below still lay staked to the superstorms. Fields remained waterlogged or parched into dust. The old farmhouse roof sagged under drifts of mud. Fuel was a dwindling prize. Food reserves would last only until the next rainy season. And above all, the climate itself showed no signs of mercy. Forecast models relayed through our makeshift network predicted another line of cyclones on the horizon, each packing more energy than the last. Standing at the spring one evening, I closed my eyes and imagined Elena beside me, smiling at the gentle musical tinkle of the water. I let myself grieve again, for her, for our children, for the world we lost. But then I felt something shift in my chest, a warmth that wasn't just the residual adrenaline of crisis. It was resolve. I realized I'd been surviving in crisis mode for so long that I'd forgotten how to build. My life had been a series of alerts and evacuations, data points and ration plans. But now, in this brittle peace, I could plant seeds, literally and metaphorically. I could help this community draft a winter plan, redesign the rooftop collection to harvest more rain, even teach classes on low-tech greenhouse construction. My broadcast shifted tone from warning danger, evacuate, to here's how. To grow microgreens in a cardboard box. And this is how to purify river water with UV LEDs. Around us, nature responded in cautious increments. The spring's flow steadied. Moss crept along the sandstone lip. Wild grasses rooted where floods had scoured the clay, stabilizing embankments. Birds, once silent for seasons, returned in small flocks, calling across the valley. Yet other signs warned that the balance remained fragile. Swarms of mosquitoes bred in stagnant pools. Algae blooms tinted the river a sickly green, and the heat still blistered the midday air. The world was healing in fits and starts, never quite sure if it wanted to live, or to let us live. On my 50th broadcast since the spring's opening, I signed on from a new studio. A reinforced shipping container wired with salvaged solar. Panels, microphones cushioned against wind, and a map chalked with expanding survivor routes. Behind me, through a small window, I could see Greenwell Ridge's spires catching the sunrise. My voice was steady as I addressed listeners across the broken continent. This isn't the end of our trials, but it is proof. When we share what we know, when we trust rather than hoard, we carve out sanctuaries in the apocalypse. Keep building, keep broadcasting, keep planting seeds of hope. We don't just endure storms, we outlast them. I ended the segment with a pause to let that promise settle, then closed with my trademark sign-off. Stay alive, stay human. I'm no longer just the voice in the static. I am a witness to rebirth. My mission has grown beyond warning of storms. It's about tending the fragile shoots of recovery. The scars of loss still ache in my bones, but they anchor me to purpose. I have seen what happens when fear rules. Now I'm learning how far cooperation can carry us. Greenwell Ridge glimmers with possibility, but it is not a utopia. It is a test of our ingenuity, our compassion, and our willingness to adapt. The climate catastrophe still looms. New superstorms are already simmering offshore. But we have a spring, and more importantly, we have each other. Around these tanks of water, alliances have formed. Trade networks sprouted, and a blueprint for survival emerged. The valley's people move forward on muddy paths, carrying water, seeds, and tools. In fields once drowned, small shoots of barley peek through. The spring song underscores every step, a reminder that life once given can echo across disaster. As I pack up my gear for tomorrow's broadcast, charts, soil samples, seed packets, I hold that melody close. Fall may come with frost or fire, and winter may steal our warmth. But for now, in the fragile light after the storm, we rebuild on water and trust. And that, I tell myself, is enough to carry us through the dark. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. The sky may crack open with another superstorm, winds screaming with the fury of everything we have lost. The valley may drown once more or shrivel into a parched wasteland. And yet, as I sit behind this microphone, bathed in the pale glow of solar lanterns, the spring's hum echoing through the piping behind me, I feel the pull of something fragile yet fierce. It's not the promise of calm skies or the end of devastation. It's the conviction that we can endure together, no matter how bleak the forecast. Since Greenwell Ridge's spring first gushed life into our cracked world, we've seen small victories blossom amid ruin. A pilot plot of barley began to wave, its golden heads in the mud flats. Children dared to play among the tanks, splashing water onto their sneakers and shrieking with laughter I never thought I'd hear again. Even the raiders, those shadowy silhouettes who once raised rifles, have traded bullets for barter, escorting supply caravans through flooded crossings in exchange for water rations. That shift didn't come from treaties signed in banquet halls, but from shared necessity, and the simple realization that death yields nothing. Still, hope is a candle flickering in shifting winds. The heat dome that broils the southern plain this week threatens to wilt every sprout we coaxed from seed. The next storm could gouge out our fragile terraces, pull the pipes from the bedrock, and turn this lush spring into a stagnant pool. The Khan, keepers, now custodians, have fortified the tanks against sabotage, but they cannot bulletproof every threat. We live on borrowed time, constantly on the lookout for the next crisis. Survival here is not a refuge, but a marathon without finish. Line, I've begun a new series of broadcasts, not merely alerts, but plans. I teach constructible flood barriers using sandbags and scrap lumber. I demonstrate low-tech cooling methods, planting shade trees, irrigating clay pots to dampen air. I lead workshops on building half-buried shelters that stay cool in drought and offer refuge in storms. Each segment airs at dawn, when dew still glistens on cracked earth, and again at dusk when lightning silhouettes the hills. My data network has expanded. We've rigged a relay, nicknamed The Chain, linking Greenwell Ridge to outposts in the Rockies, the Appalachians, and even a ramshackle station by the Gulf Coast. Each node feeds back local conditions, water levels, crop yields, fuel stores, and raider sightings. From this web of information, I assemble survival bulletins. Actionable, localized, peer-driven. No longer am I a lone voice crying in the void. I'm the hub of a sprawling organism, ever growing, ever adapting, yet every gain has a cost. Supplies we traded for seeds have dwindled. My pedal generator's chain is wearing thin, and replacements are scarce. The plywood walls of our broadcast container splinter under hail. Each time I venture beyond the ridge to repair antennae or barter for batteries, I risk ambush, disorientation, or drowning in flash floods. The memory of the locker room. Collapse in Pine Hollow still coils in my stomach. 3 of our best field technicians lost in a flash wash, swept away in seconds. I carry that grief into every decision, a reminder that knowledge is only as good as the lives we protect with it. My own body reminds me daily of the toll. Nights of sleepless vigilance, days spent lugging water and gear, meals of foraged roots, and ration tins. My shoulders ache, my vision blurs, a permanent line of tension etches my jaw. There are moments I lie awake in the dark, paddle generator cooling at my feet, wondering if I'm selfish to hold on. Would the world be better, off silent, a relic like the empty towns we pass? But then I replay the laughter at the spring, the sight of solar lanterns blinking in the rain, the child's voice over the radio thanking me for teaching how to build a gutter-fed cistern. And I press on. Just yesterday, I watched a team of volunteers plant willow cuttings along an eroded bank, a simple species that thrives in wet soil, stabilizing banks against flood surges. They labored knee-deep in water, hands raw, faces lit by fleeting sunbeams. Each sapling was a statement. We will shape this land. We will endure. When they finished, a hush fell over the group as they stepped back to admire the row of hopeful green. I broadcast their effort, coaxing others to undertake similar projects in their own ravaged landscapes. That image, the line of saplings bending in a breeze touched with ash, held more weight than any weather model or ration schedule. It was proof that even in devastation, humans could sow renewal. And that, I realized, is the crux of our struggle. Hope isn't found in full reservoirs or blue skies. It's cultivated in the deliberate act of reaching toward life, however. Slim the chance. So here, at the close of this broadcast, I offer no grand resolution. No silver lining emerges from the maelstrom. The climate will not relent. The storms will not forget us. But I give you this, the choice to continue, to build. Sandbag levees, plant cuttings, barter fairly, share knowledge. To trust but verify. To move as a network of scattered survivors, not islands paddling alone. I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know if the spring at Greenwell Ridge will outlive the next superstorm. I don't know if our saplings will root or be washed away, but I know this. As long as a single voice still echoes through the static, calling out warnings, sharing tactics, telling the story of both ruin and resilience, there is a chance. A chance for you, wherever you are, to take that seed, the knowledge, the community, the promise of life, and plant it in your own hollow. Survival is no longer about outlasting the storm. It's about finding the spark of hope in the storms, and keeping it alive. It's about knowing that every act of cooperation, even bartering a can of beans for a barrel of water, tips the balance in our favor. It's about remembering that we are not simply victims of a changing climate, but stewards of the world we must rebuild. So keep your antennae tuned, your hands busy, and your hearts open. Share what you know. Guard what cannot be replaced and let go of what must pass. Fight for the next sunrise and then the one after that. The storms will come, but they will not silence us. We are still here. And as long as we breathe, we have the power to persist. Stay alive. Stay human.